The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of this protracted experience of death, and I will dwell in the house of the most superintelligent power, source, and force of love and creation forever. What's happening? Benson here. Gonna keep it short. Yeah, right. Uh, the goal is 1 hour. Keep it to 1 hour. It's the goal. We're about 15 miles away from the delivery. The royal we, of course. And I just realized I've failed to prepare the fruit. Let's do that. Bear with me, folks. And I pulled a boner. I have this yohimbe extract. If anybody knows what that is, it's known as a stimulant, herbal, or it's from a root or a leaf or something, probably African. And I thought I was squirting ginger into my egg drink, and then I squirted a little under my tongue, and then I realized, oh wait, that's the yohimbe extract. So that started to hit me just before the stream began. So yeah, that's happening. But I can feel the increased heart rate. I definitely feel it's tapping into the old adrenals, which being pretty well rested overall, it's not really something desired at this time. Oh, as I crack open a can of Stumptown Coffee Roasters Cold Brew Delight coffee in a can, 155 milligrams of caffeine. Oh, I'm sure that's also great for the adrenals there, sir. Bottoms up. What a mess. But yeah, just the hilarity of realizing what I've done to myself here in some ways with the proper rest in conjunction with accidentally taking stimulant that then taps into the adrenaline and norepinephrine or something, norepinephrine, I don't know, which I guess is similar to adrenaline. How silly. Anyway, we'll recover from that. And yeah, feeling a little funky. It's also making my the area where I have a lot of inflammation, my right shoulder, and the actual shoulder socket. Should mention more and more I'm getting down into the pain of that actual shoulder joint, which was mostly covered up in the past. And I remember I got a real bad crick in my neck at an early age, probably, I don't know how old I was, maybe very early teenage years, or maybe 12, 13, somewhere in there. So whatever nerve pain's going on in that area, And so when I say I had a crick in my neck, I mean, this was like my neck got stuck in a strange position for like several days. I'm not a person who just has a random ache and pain. And like most of the time, I don't even mention it. But yeah, and also I can feel I'm a little irritated. Yeah, it's funny. And so, how much of our mood, when we individually, right? I say we. Who do you mean, sir? Well, whoever may listen to this rhetorically. Um, and yeah, you as a listener, you're able to listen to what I'm saying, and then, on your best day or my best day, I'm able to tune in and receive information and listen to another person talk. But I think for a lot of folks, myself included at times, it's really more about whatever someone else's ideas and someone else's speech, may elicit in my own thinking, right? And surely I would have to assume that, most of the very limited number of people who listen to this, have to be doing some version of thinking for themselves. I would think, right? Be my guess anyway. To what extent that may happen, across the board, and I recognize continuing to fall victim to, certain uh, forms of mind control, propaganda, influence, you know, um, upbringing, all of these various layers within the psyche, you know, and how much of modern society, modern living is tied up in the system, continuing uh, to install and operate, install the code of the mind control, the influence, the persuasion, and uh, operating the masses by proxy in many ways. And you know, my observations of social media, especially these what I see filtering out of TikTok, seems to bear that out. Um, Certain channels that remix, especially people complaining about the job market or um, layoffs and a lot of times, of course, it's so-called projection or they're talking to themselves, right? Just you know, it's under the auspices of word of mouthing some friendly, helpful advice, like you have a job, don't leave it, you know, because of the presumably because the person doing the TikTok has been looking for work for 8 months or whatever. What's up, Rachel Zinger? Makes sense to Rachel. Well, good. I like it. I enjoy making sense from time to time. Now, what makes me a silly Billy is doing things like accidentally taking too much of a stimulant first thing in the morning, and it's so strong that I've gotten the only time I use it typically is I'll do 6 little drops in my first egg drink, and that's it. That's all I take in of it. And actually, there's a little bit of it in one of these herbal capsules I take, but it's a small amount. And I've taken it before and never could even feel anything from it as far as the adrenals. But this happened maybe 30 minutes ago, and then I was like, "Why am I feeling a little irritated? What's going on here?" And I noticed my heartbeat had sped up. My breathing was starting to, you know, heavier breathing. It's like, what the fuck? Oh, the damn Yohimbi. I knew I done fucked up. I knew I done fucked up. Well, most likely the day won't be affected. A little bit of headache too, although that may be the delay in caffeine because I've been awake I started my day very early, uh, 2 to 3 mornings in a row on the road by 1 a.m. Yeah, 3 nights in a row. Well, the first night it was two. I was on the road by 2:30, but I didn't really sleep much. But I laid down, and then yeah, it's on the road by 1 a.m. the next 2 mornings. And then now I looked at my work assignment, and I don't believe I even have an appointment time. Let me see if it says anything on the bills. This might be we're supposed to call and get an appointment. Oh, this is 6 p.m. What the hell? Huh. I wonder if that's means anything. I don't know. I'm going to have to do some further research. Another reason to keep it short on the stream. And I'm dreading even lately. I've been subjected to so much tight backing and you know, realistically beyond my skill level of backing. Uh, I don't even want to. I'm going to wait till as late as possible to actually see what the layout of the facility is up here in Connecticut. It's not just the Northeast. Atlanta's got a lot of places that are pretty brutal. Although New Jersey seems to be the king of having a sign that says trucks back in from the street. So one of my favorites. Don't even drive in forward. You will not be able to turn around. Don't even think about it. This is where my laziness meets practicality. It's freezing outside. Somebody here. Wow. You need to pour this water out on the ground. So now I'm going to have, hilariously, when the water freezes, it'll be right where I get in and out of my truck. It's like, yeah, I'm not putting my shoes on and walking away from the truck. That'd be crazy when I can open the door and pour it out directly into my way. How silly of me. All right, we got the grapes and the blueberries ready. Rinsed off in their bowls. Yep. I don't know if I have too many profound statements to make this morning. Yeah, I'm curious to see what becomes of this Yohimbe overdose. Kind of reminds me when me and my bozo friends used to go to the truck stop and get those cross tops, which was back then was a ephedrine. Of course, we didn't know what the fuck ephedrine was. So for some reason, we used to sit in class, and this is what children do. It's like we take like 20 of those things and have our hearts beating out of our chests during class. Why? Yeah, that's what we needed at age 13. Stimulants. I'm going to Google Yohimbe extract and adrenals. See what it says. Do your own research, people. Or not. Yohimbe extract significantly affects the adrenal glands by promoting the release of adrenaline, epinephrine. I don't pronounce that. Epinephrine, and norepinephrine, which I'm assuming is similar to adrenaline. Same word with no in front of it, or actually nor, leading to a noticeable increase in sympathetic nervous system activity. Well, we don't need that. What are you doing, sir? This mechanism underlies its use as a stimulant, but is also associated with potentially serious side effects. Yohimbe's primary active compound, yohimbine, which is an alkaloid, works by blocking alpha-2 adrenergic, something to do with adrenals receptors. These receptors usually act as a negative feedback mechanism, regulating the release of norepinephrine from sympathetic nerves. I'd really like to know how to pronounce that. Increased we're just going to say adrenaline. I can't pronounce that word. Increased adrenaline release. By blocking these receptors, yohimbine enhances the release and spillover of adrenaline into the bloodstream. Adrenal gland stimulation. The increased plasma adrenaline levels in turn signal the adrenal glands to release more adrenaline. Oh, great. Sympathetic nervous system activation. This surge in both forms of adrenaline, because you got the nor and the one without the nor on it, results in a hyperadrenal, again, words I can't pronounce, so I'm having to change them into something. I don't even know what these words are. Essentially putting the body into a fight or flight state. Yeah, see, that's what I'm feeling. It's that's the nervousness. This impacts multiple bodily systems, including the cardiovascular system, nervous system, and metabolism. The stimulating effects of yohimbe on the adrenals and sympathetic nervous system are the basis for its use in bodybuilding, sexual performance enhancement, and weight loss. However, these effects are also the cause of its significant health risks. What's going on here? Aha. Psychological effects. The increase in neural activation and sympathetic outflow can induce anxiety, agitation, restlessness, and headaches. Yep, we're there. We are there right now. Yes, sir. It is specifically cautioned against for those trying to manage stress or recover from so-called adrenal fatigue. And so arguably I was somewhat recovering from probably a mild adrenal fatigue and maybe had just achieved that when I woke up this morning and then accidentally took something that is not recommended for anybody who's dealing with adrenal fatigue. So, yeah. The realm certainly has its sense of humor, as we see. Goodness gracious. Well, hopefully an hour or two I'll be back to normal. Delicious coffee, though. I made it to Whole Foods yesterday and a laundromat and Walmart, and I realized I screwed up. I ordered a new phone to an Amazon counter at Whole Foods because unlike the Amazon locker, they keep the package at Amazon at Whole Foods for 2 weeks, but I could have had it sent here to Connecticut, and it got delivered yesterday. So even then, I would have to wait for Whole Foods to open, and I actually might not even have had time to go there this morning. And then, yeah, we have the company services a regular customer in this area. That's where I am now. However, in truck driving, I could easily leave today and not come back for 2 weeks. So I guess it's kind of neither here nor there. Yeah, so my phone's in Indianapolis. New refurbished Pixel 9 Pro XL. Getting a little bit of that nausea now too. Yeah, buddy. What a disaster. I'm going to have to put this somewhere where I can't just easily reach and grab thinking it's my ginger, because they're in the same style of bottle. Yeah, that was silly. Find another place to put it. Silly man. Well, can't beat myself up too much for what at the end of the day was just an an error, mistake. Although with my harshly critical and nature, I do have a tendency to be very hard on myself, right? And a bit self-flagellating. So I must brood before ultimately accepting the error of my ways. It is an interesting meditation on this so-called life. Uh, Life is breakfast cereal. Mikey likes it, and protracted experience of death. And shout out to Miss Zinger. I don't know how long she sticks around or what, but I've ran off most of the females. Although I don't know that was my intention, but sometimes I get a kick out of myself when I'm driving. I'll be thinking about things, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. I probably wouldn't show up if I was a lady. I probably wouldn't show up to somebody who can't stop, who now refers to life as death. You know, I mean, who wants to wake up in the morning and face death, right? Well, that's an interesting question because, like it or not, that's what every human is born into. So to be human is to be born into a process of death. I mean, and it's called life. So there's a word life, and it actually refers to and describes death. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, white crosses. Yeah, at the truck stop. It's funny. I stocked up back when I was doing the weightlifting. It was well known you could take ephedrine, caffeine, and aspirin together was an effective uh, stimulant for lifting weights and athleticism. And I happened to find online, like, I got a real good deal on like 10 bottles of it's like ephedrine hydrochloride. Just I guess powdered, pressed into tablets. And uh, I had just started dating ex-wife number two, and she ate all the bottles in like a week or something. I was like, damn, what's going on here? Yeah, I couldn't really be mad at her too much, but it was like, I stocked up on those because they banned them. Right? I mean, you know that, right? Like, we're not going to be able to get more of these. And, we were both waiting tables at the time, or hell, I might have still been working at a gas station. And, it's like, I don't necessarily even have the money to order more. I think I got to take a little bit of it, but she took, and I'm probably exaggerating, but she ate at least a couple of those bottles. It's like, damn it. Actually, it was her apartment. I just moved in. We started sharing the bills. Hell, maybe one of her stupid friends stole them. I mean, who even knows? That's funny. But yeah, back to, you know, me describing this realm as death. And then that's what it is. This is not a living realm. Hate to break it to you. Um, what I am is the way, what I am is the truth, what I am is the life. That has nothing to do with this world. And so, you know, juxtapose that with the Bible talking about, um, I do need to see what's going on outside the window here. I know that I can talk this loud. Nobody's really around though. Yeah, I think we're good. There's a truck parked next to me, but his trailers, the ass end of his trailers at the front of my truck. So I think I just heard him close his door. Um, and so, the perspective of the human, is to have senses and eyes and hearing and a sense of smell and all of this. And, how much of that is outwardly directed versus, how much of that is directed inwardly, right? And then how much pressure does society, via the psyche and the psychology, how much daily effort, how much of the individual's focus and attention, is coercively, in my view, directed outwardly, to the the trappings of this world, right? And the well, you got to do this and you got to do that, and school and parents and obligation, and making something of oneself, and uh, you know, that's without even getting into the money making and business aspects. And it's all dead. There's no future in any of it, right? No future. Now, one can choose to view a dead thing as if it were alive, right? And use that to reject what I'm saying here, which is completely fine, because there's no team. There's no spiritual team, right? There's no, uh, there's nothing whatsoever beyond a individual experience spiritually. You're on your own. Now, if you are what I am, well, that doesn't come with loneliness, because what I am is one with the most super intelligent power source and force of love and creation. So when I talk about on your own, that's in relation to this world, because this world, let's remember, in being defined on the basis of death, it's the lack of whatever would resolve a condition of loneliness. So this world is loneliness. But when this world is able to, plausibly at the level of consensus, because all these other people were already here when I got here, and all of these various systems were already in motion when I got here, at least Benton in this form, and it's then a simple matter to teach and indoctrinate falsehoods into the child, right? And to teach the child, well, this is life, this is your life, you know, and it's all about making money and toiling and struggling, you know, in service of these various systems. Servitude, probably a better way to put it. And see, none of what I'm describing, that doesn't mean, okay, that's life. Meaning everything I'm describing is absolutely possible within systems that are not living and not breathing. You know, it's absolutely possible for someone to be wandering around and then happen upon a performance of something that's not genuine or something that is fake, right? So that's how I'm starting to see this world more and more, is to leave the mother's womb. Womb is another word for matrix, and to then be inserted into this matrix where all of these various dances are occurring. And so, it seems to have its own momentum, and it seems to all be very necessary, right? Except none of us knows what would happen if we just knocked it off, right? Now look at what happened during the pandemic, right? People, more or less stopped their education in a lot of ways. A lot of people stopped their employment in a lot of ways. They stopped the social, they stopped socializing, at least in the ways that had been considered normal, most of their so-called lives. And what happened as a result? Now, yeah, we can argue that a lot of damage occurred to individuals psychologically, emotionally, trauma. A lot of people went through a lot of struggle. Well, that was already all happening. See, this is like the pandemic and the lockdowns and all of this. Yeah, sure, that was all damaging, but the damage was being done anyway, right? This is just more of like damage originating from a different source, perhaps. And to me, what I find instructive is to recognize that, the fact that all of these various interplays of business and transportation and, the political system and, government, banking, corporations, whatever's going on, whatever society is performing, how much of it is actually necessary in the short term? And I would say almost none of it's necessary in the short term. Right? If everybody stayed home for 1 month, how many people would starve to death? And I'm asking rhetorically. I don't know. No idea. Right? How many people would be evicted from their homes? Well, how many have already been evicted from their home? Again, I don't know that anybody's starving to death in America. How long would the population, how long would the workers have to just not go to work before people started starving to death? Like, I don't know, 6 months? Then people say, oh, you don't want to have a breakdown in society. The looting, the pillaging, the crime would be off the charts. And I'm like, would be? I thought that was what was happening now. So what you're saying is what's going on now will happen, but it'll happen worse. It's like, okay, well, it's already popping off as far as I can tell. So, um, Now, what would be instructive for the people is, hey, this is crazy. Society, clearly the people are enslaved to the society, right? So if what I am is the way, what I am is the truth, what I am is the life, somehow that's been subverted and it's been shackled to a world of death and games of lies, and it's in fact through its own actions and thoughts a symbolic representation of supreme creation authority, justice, expansion, love, tolerance, acceptance. It's been entrapped in a dead form, the human body, and it's undergoing a dead experience, the human experience. And I've been told that there's people who lead rewarding, fulfilling lives. I've been told that. I don't see that happening. Right? I don't observe that happening. That's not been my experience in watching other people. Because that's sort of, to be sold a bill of goods that, well, yeah, do what you're told, work hard, achieve, be smart, don't be foolish, and you will be rewarded with what? What's my reward? To not die in the streets to not die in the streets like a dog. Except actually, you can't even say that anymore because dogs are treated better than people. Now the dog is of this world. See, so from the perspective of this world, it is better than you. The dog is better than you from the perspective of this world. And that's just how that works. The dog is the master. Who's got it better than a dog in this world of death? Right. Again, if what you are is what I am, and even if it's deeply buried, this righteous, perfected path that may lie within. Well, that's the one thing, that's the one phenomenon that this realm can't fucking stand. See? And a realm based on the lack of love, well, it knows a whole lot about hate now, doesn't it? So what I am is hated. And it's so hated that it's been encircled and entrapped and encased by a literal dead flesh that seems to be living. And yes, it's wondrous in certain ways. It heals itself given the right circumstances. But is that even the case? Or is it the spirit of what I am, right? Animated death warmed over through the subversion of the creative force of what I am? What if it's actually the intelligence and the power of what I am heals the dead flesh? See? So we don't really know. We don't know. Now, clearly, if the person gets proper rest, they eat proper food, they get, the right nutrition. Now genetics plays a part, whatever that is. But my experience is healing is available. And is it important that I understand the mechanism, right? Or if I'm able to trust that healing is available, and if I'm able to trust that I will receive healing, and in fact, that's been my experience in this protracted experience of death, then do I really need to know anything beyond that? And I can, and here's where there's no creating an organization, here's where there's no possibility of collaboration is I will never be able to tell you about what's going on inside of you. And if I do, I don't know what I'm talking about. Now, I can speculate and I can say, well, based on my own experience, maybe this is the case for you. And maybe it's not. I have no way of knowing. It's simply, I can never know that. And that proves that this has to be a wholly individual experience spiritually, because remember, again, outside of the context of this delusory realm, it ain't possible for this to even be happening. There's not actually a Benton. The problem with that is now I'm telling the listener that there's not a listener, meaning, whatever your biography is, whatever your name is, whatever your face looks like, guess what? It's all dead. Never existed except with the combination of what? The subversion of the creative force of what I am and waking dream, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again, an imagining, right? A dream, a repeated dream, right? And then you get into the psyche, persona, so-called ego. Yeah, it's a psychology. Great. Guess what? I've been observing it most of the minutes of every day for many years now. My own psychology, which can never even, number one, it's never real in the first place. Number two, it's not even mine, right? Because if what I am is transcendent of death and is victorious over everything, including death, right? Then how can there be a value in possessing death? And in fact, I would argue that what is living by definition is in flow and moving and always growing, expanding, changing, evolving. And it can't be grasped or captured. The moment it's grasped or captured, it immediately begins a process of decay and dying, and therefore is not the quote real thing. And that's the crux of the Job, which I'm sure I've said there's several different keys and cruxes, but the story of Job, book of Job, have you considered my servant Job? It's like, yeah, well, if he's air quotes the real thing, none of us has anything to worry about, because the real thing can't ever know defeat. So yeah, shoot your shot, Satan. And what's Benton been saying on here? Demons, do your worst, right? And for me, it's about when and again, prayer is not really the proper term, but lacking a better term, when I pray aloud in the mornings, and it's a version of ask and ye shall receive. Well, see, that's a promise. That's not a condition, right? So in asking for protection and deliverance from wicked spirits, unclean spirits, demonic spirits, spiritual attack of all types, no weapon formed shall prosper. See, that's real. And in fact, that is the spirit of what I am. See, so surprise, surprise, way less prone to falling victim to spiritual attacks of late. Now, if I created an organization or I joined an organization that taught, well, here's a certain type of prayer, and here's a certain way of living, well, that is extremely limited, right? And then eventually what you would see is it would just be a version of Benton, born as to Jehovah's Witness parents, being taught a bunch of nonsense that none of it can actually be acted upon, because it's the moment it's codified and it's turned into doctrine and dogma, it begins that process of dying and decaying. See? So that, something that may have had some life to it in the 1800s when it began, by the time Benton comes around, born in 1975, that organization has crystallized and hardened, and there's no life there. So what's left is what? Evilness, is evil, wickedness, and death, in the place of something that initially seemed to be, attractive and fulfilling and had the so-called answers, right? Versus an individual such as Benton putting in the work, leveraging his own skills and talents to effectively found his own spiritual order and, dare I say, religion, right, in a singular fashion. And it now operates on an ongoing basis within me, see, and nowhere else. And at times I might want to tell other people about it. That's a mistake, right? That's the mistake, is trying to tell other people about it. Now, it's not always a mistake. I mean, there's certainly, again, there's a reason why Benton's a preacher, but that's more of a spontaneous thing, in service of that, the spirit of what I am, which I can't, the limited Benton form can't even know necessarily. And I don't know that thing has plans. I don't know that the larger force has plans necessarily. I know that so many things have occurred in my own so-called life where clearly I was being, I had expressed a desire to be used as a vessel of, air quotes, to the Most High. And that certainly has happened at times. Again, asking ye shall receive. Too many things have occurred, where I was in the right place at the right time to facilitate, something in someone else's so-called life, and vice versa. None of that. And again, these are miracles. Now the thing about miracles is we don't really see them as miracles in the moment. But then if a religion, if the Catholic Church, if an organization that seems to be authoritative, declares it a miracle, well, that's how you get your saints. By definition, miracles are required for sainthood. If you look at what's actually ends up being considered to be a miracle, a lot of it's fairly mundane in my experience. The idea of Christ crucified and then arising from the dead. Well, I almost fucking died of what may have well have been pancreatic cancer. I may be recovering from bowel cancer. How the fuck do I know? I don't know. How would I know? I don't go to the doctor. Is that any different? Right? Many people have healed from their wounds. Many people's flesh has regenerated. And I'm not, in any way poo-pooing Christ's achievement. I'm pointing out that, a lot of things that may otherwise be unexplained, that doesn't mean that they're, again, you can refer to it as a miracle. And these so-called miracles are mainly viewed as like a superpower. Like, you know, if Jesus was here, he would have the ability to just more or less like having magical superpowers, right? It's like, well, yeah, in a way, sure, but um, I'm sure that was the case. However, I believe a lot of that's overblown, and the reason a lot of it's overblown is because one of the functions of Christianity is the believers can't. It's going to be a problem for the power structure and the powers that be if the adherents, the practitioners of the religion, you know, begin to understand and wield their own power, right? Sure, as long as the congregants remain disempowered and they behave properly and they occupy the church pews and they tithe, right? That's all well and good. There you go. Rachel believes in miracles. She's experienced them. Well, there you go. And part of that is to not be cut off from the possibility of a miracle. It reminds me of when I went to truck driving school and there was like 16 students competing for 8 positions because they could only have a class of 8 people because there were only 2 instructors, and by law it's 4 students per instructor. That's of course if the school follows the law, right? As we found out, there's many that don't. There's many companies, a lot of things in truck driving are not by the regulation and not by law. And it's probably always been that way, and it probably will always be that way. What was I going to say? So, this lady in my truck driving school, the moment we all found out that, hey, the guy's like, hey, the first 8 of you that passes all these written tests, and, text me, a picture of, your uh, CLP, your commercial learner's permit. That's whoever does the first 8 people. That's who's going to be taught how to drive it. That's who's going to take the training. And so older black woman in front of me, um, I don't know, mid 50s, I guess. And she just immediately decided that she wasn't capable of it. So there, guess what? She blocked herself. She cut herself off from the possibility of maybe there would be a miracle. It reminds me of getting on a Greyhound bus. The driver takes a look at my ticket and immediately says, well, I hope you know that there's no way if you making this connecting bus. I said, I don't know anything. Because I was just understood, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but there's no advantage to me, going along with whatever he's saying. And I had already come to that conclusion anyway. And it was like, oh, well, we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. Meanwhile, I don't know what happened, but I did, in fact, make my connecting bus. And, whether or not that's a miracle, who knows? But I know half the battle is to trust and to what, folks? Surrender spiritually and in part to accept, what's going to happen, which is to potentially be accepting of a miracle. Many people are not open to the possibility of a miracle happening in their life. And perhaps they themselves are that. To me, that's to be too identified with death. And that seems to me like the people who run around talking about how wonderful life is all the time. And why is it effectively outlawed and taboo, to even talk anything that seems negative, right? Or sounds negative. It's like, okay, well, I don't see where exactly are the American people traveling to as a result of what I would refer to as toxic positivity. Like it's not doing anything helpful, but I would argue that it psychologically prevents the individual from existing in a more true or less false reality. Because the moment that I am willing to accept and do accept things around me as they seem to be unfolding versus what I have been taught that they are, and what uh we all just sort of hope they become, right? And what we all sort of assumed things would be like, right? I'm saying, what good is any of that if it doesn't line up with reality? And I don't mean true reality, I mean like the shared reality of what's going on. Because when I talk about rich people getting that, the function of the economy is that rich people, uh, the wealth of the rich, the truly wealthy, it grows every new moment into perpetuity, and that is the function of the economy. You can't debate that. That's what happens. That's what always happens, and that will never not happen. There's never one moment in history, and it's Robin Hood. That never happens. It's the wealth is the robbing of the poor. See, that's how rich people are rich, by taking the resources that would be utilized potentially by the poor people. And poor is anybody who's not wealthy. Now, because Americans believe the lies, all Americans are potentially wealthy in their own minds, and they can't tell the difference. See, if you might be wealthy in the future, your brain can't understand that you're poor. And I mean poor as far as access to resources. I don't mean uh, poor, like downtrodden, sad, begging in the streets, although for some that is the reality. Okay. And like we see with people born into wealth, a Nick Reiner or whoever, it's not just it's not a one-to-one where now everybody's life's wonderful. See, it's not, and again, so-called life. But how did his family amass true wealth? Through a bloodline, by serving death, by serving what is evil, by serving what is wicked, by blaspheming in the Holy Spirit, by completely and wholly marrying themselves and their children and their bloodline, and taking the experience so seriously to say, yes, this is the entirety of potential existence. And, anything that will enrich our family, anything that will lead to more money in the bank, anything that will lead to, us being able to live a certain type of life is justifiable, right? And the system says, hey, I just need servants of evil and what is wicked and depraved and fallen and repugnant and disgusting. Do you think this world of death gives a fuck? It doesn't care who shows up to do that, right? And then amongst the group that will sign themselves up, well, now we get into, okay, who's the most capable? Who's the, pardon me. Hang on. We got some more demons leaving, perhaps. Woo! I don't know what that was, but I sure did get shed of it. Oh yeah. We got energetic forms. This is what I mean by the dead flesh and the death of the human experience. It's the spirit of what I am, the source of the the only true power and source of life in this place is it's so intertwined with death and a dead world and a dead flesh and dead systems and dead thinking that just based on my own speech at times, some of those forms are like, wait, it's like they get confused. They're like, wait a minute, we thought this was our home. We thought we were within a being who rocked with what we rock with. That way, he's actually about all this other stuff. Oh, we didn't think he meant that. Oh, he means it. We're out of here. Well, and the demon says, I'd rather go wander in the dry place than deal with this bozo. Remember, what I am is torture from the perspective of this world of death. There's nothing more torturous than any expression of the living spirit of what I am. It's this realm's kryptonite. And whatever that demon was says, no, we got to get up out of here. Uh-uh. And again, expelled through the throat chakra. So anytime I feel that coffin coming up, I don't hold back. I let her rip. Yes, sir. I think the Yohimbi's wearing off now, thankfully. Yeah. I have a lot of these tinctures, these Horbach brand. I don't know if anybody's into supplements. They've probably seen this brand. Horbaach with a accent over one of the first A. It's the same company as Carlisle, which is, one of your big pharma companies. But for the quality and the price, it's some of the best tinctures, I would say. But the drawback is you don't really know what a dose is. It just says servings per container. Some of them says 59, some of them says 30, and it just says serving size 1 milliliter. The Yohimbi says 30 servings, and a serving is 2 milliliters or 2 dropperfuls. That's way too much. Right. Well, that's what it says on the package to take. It's like, no, don't do that. So the user has to just kind of know how to figure out the dosage. That makes sense. Yeah, good stuff otherwise. I don't recommend anything necessarily, but it's worked out for me. As the size of Benton's apothecary begins to grow yet again. And so this is one of the utilities of money, or the functions of money, again, as a form of death, is, driving a truck and making a certain amount of money and then limiting my living expenses to where now I have enough liquid cash to where, not having a car, not having a place to live, and not, the reality is, if I had to move out of this truck in order to continue to keep all of my possessions, I would need to, in the short term, probably rent a motel room by the week, probably an extended stay somewhere in a city, and then move my things out of the truck into that, and, rent that by the week long enough to figure out what's plan B, or just, say, well, I have enough money to buy all of this stuff again if I have to, and just walk away from it. Right. Again, the things we own end up owning us. And at this point, I don't even want another car. I just, the idea of car insurance and, they immediately turned me over to collections when I stopped paying my car insurance, which is fine, but, whatever. But I guess, and part of that was I just didn't call them, I chose not to let them know when I sold the vehicle. And, So some of it's self-inflicted, but I mean, who even cares if at the end of the day, I'm not going to have a car anyway, that means I'm not going to have car insurance. And, I don't do anything in my existence that requires a credit rating. So, I mean, what's the difference? Meanwhile, I know from experience that if I do buy another car, that you know I've been able to get liability insurance for somewhere around $100 a month, or maybe a little less. And I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming if the general insurance won't insure me anymore, I'm guessing somebody else will. It's all like, apparently it all comes back to Lloyd's of London anyway. And then there's like however many, you know, major insurance underwriters, but apparently they all pretty much go back to Lloyd's of London. It's what I've been told. I haven't looked into it myself enough to really know, but it seems to make sense. Then you get into actuaries and, whatever mathematics and, whatever calculations are involved in the scheme, right, of insurance. And insurance certainly is a scheme by definition. You look up, if we look up the meaning of the word scheme, insurance as a phenomenon is a scheme, certainly. So if I referred to someone as a schemer, does that sound good or does that sound bad? Well, it's like, well, it would be situational if we're going to go based on the definition of, what is a schemer. But some of the definitions are certainly going to be completely negative, right? Let's look it up. What is a schemer? Go to my dictionary app here. Schemer. One who plots or schemes, who formulates devious plans. Devious means cunning or deceiving, not straightforward or honest, not frank. Well, doesn't that describe the entire phenomenon of insurance as it exists today? Are you telling me that's not an accurate representation of the industry of insurance? Right? So in a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, where parents sacrifice their children to Moloch and Moloch's machine of industrial and post-industrial society, and mom says some version of, well, I just want little Johnny or little Susie to be happy. And then the definition of that in this world is, especially as an American, is we as society only measure in money. Well, if little Johnny or little Susie goes into scheming, right, goes into the insurance rackets and has a big house and sends the grandchildren to private school, and they have something of what's on paper looks like a proper so-called life, then what's the difference? That, people like my mom who didn't know any better bought some kind of uh, form of life insurance that it turns out is they stole her money, right? I forget what they call it, but, and, a lot of people have fallen victim to this over time. Because it's a scheme, right? They play on people's desire for something that sounds beneficial, and it's also affordable. Well, yeah, it's affordable, but if the person pays once a month for 40 years, that's a lot of fucking money. And then they eventually figure out, oh, this is basically worthless. It's like, yeah, the system figured out how to steal, $20 or $40 a month from somebody for 30 to 40 years and provided them with nothing, right? In exchange for nothing of practical value. That's a scheme. When I'm listening to some YouTuber who works at a warehouse and seems to be, somewhat enlightened, although that's not even the proper term on certain levels. But really, he's a free thinker. He thinks for himself. He's got some, I can listen to him and tell he's got some stuff figured out. Some of it's a fake it till you make it, but, he's the next thing he's living with his parents, and, that's common anyway and somewhat acceptable. But, he didn't have a car and he didn't have a job, but he's willing to work hard at a warehouse. And he's correct when he says, well, I pretty much need the car to get to the job. And, he didn't have the money to just buy a car like Benton does. So he got into a bad car loan, right? And it's like, well, do you think the system cares if you understand that that's a mistake, or does it just care that you're willing to make the mistake? Like, what's the difference? Now, it's less bad from the individual's perspective, but now he's talking about, he's had a couple of accidents, and, he's a black fella, so, a little more inclined to need to have a certain type of car to put out a certain type of image. So, it's one of these cars that costs a ton of money to fix, which is all of them anymore. But it's, if a person has a BMW or whatever, it's just, it's expensive, and now it's more expensive. Right. And then again, can he drive around in a Nissan Versa hatchback? Yeah, probably not. Can't pull up in that. Right. So now you're looking at, as I talked about with one of these guys that works at one of these places I've been delivering to. Well, I've delivered there twice, and I was talking about my Nissan Versa, and I was like, yeah, the set of tires was less than $300 installed. And then he's like, yeah, my charger is like $1,000. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, that's a big part of why I chose to drive those type of cars. People don't think about that. They just think, oh, well, we'll figure it out later. But then, so he's saying the body work on his car is supposed to be like $10,000. Meanwhile, what's he owe on it? He's still making payment. You're really gonna, and then the insurance already paid him out. And then now we're back to the scheme of insurance where they don't make him whole. He gives them money every month, and then they decide what they're willing to do for him. Right. And he has no power in the situation. Now he can, maybe sue them, or he can, negotiate or push back a little bit. But, at the end of the day, he has no real power to do anything. It's just like, oh, well, they probably cut him a check for $3,000. He's, like most of us do, spend it on something else, and then, continues to make payments on a car that's, got a bunch of body damage on it. Right. And how many people are living versions of that? Does that sound like life to anybody? What's up, Leslie? Good to see you. Yeah, always helpful reminders of what's actually happening from Miss Leslie. So I do appreciate that. Indeed, you are not wrong, as far as I can tell. As far as I can tell. Well, I guess I'm going to move on, since I said I was going to keep it short, and if I go much longer, that will no longer be achievable. So, thanks for watching. Bye.